Okay, hello everyone. So this talk now about the Yocto project, which I'm going to give, I need to be very fast apparently, I have 15 minutes. So let's just jump straight into it. I'm going to talk about the recent changes and the future directions of the Yocto project. I'm at least going to try to summarize it. The reason for that is that I am currently the maintainer of the documentation for the Yocto project. So I just see things moving in the project. I try to document them. I try to keep the docs up to date. And so the idea of this talk is just to give you, not everything, of course, because there's lots of bug fixes. We don't really care about that. Let's just talk about the new features, the cool stuff, at least what I think is cool, right? And yeah, so let's just, I'm just going to throw stuff at you. No real order. Let's just go straight in. So let's take a look at the release cycle first, just to see where we're at right now. So last week, WalnutScar was released, the 5.2 release here. And I guess most people right now are using ScartGap, right? So my idea was just to cover these 3 releases because I only have a limited time. And as you can see up there, there are 2 new releases coming up, which are feature releases. And especially the last one here is the LTS release. So also a small note that Kirkstone users should maybe start worrying and maybe update, but just an idea. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about is something really simple, but I think is a nice quality of life improvement. It's just a variable called user add depends, and lots of times when you're doing Yocto, you want to find new users on your target. And it's kind of a mess sometimes to just manage everything within your recipes. And this variable here is quite nice because it just allows you to define some dependencies between your recipes and avoid recreating everything all the time. So let's just take an example. Here we have the first recipe here, which is creating a group called my group. And quite simply, what you just need to do here in another recipe is just make a dependency on the first one and reuse the group in the second recipe. So in that case, I didn't have to recreate everything with the group add param variable. So really simple. You can be creative, I believe, within your recipes to use that. But yeah, I think this was introduced in ScartGap, so it's a bit old, but I think it's really nice. Another thing that was introduced in ScartGap is a new devtool command, which is not so popular, I believe. It's a really complex command, which isn't, well, it should be an alternative to populate SDK, which is allowing to generate SDKs. The idea is to create an SDK and a remote debugging and cross-development environment for any application. So if you are doing application development, this will be useful to you. Basically, there are 3 steps to set it up. First step are top-level configurations. I'm not going to detail them here, but there is a link in the slide. Then you want to modify the recipe with devtool. So if you know devtool already, this will just extract the sources in a directory. The last step here is to call the IDE SDK command. This will, combined with an image recipe, create a remote debugging configuration automatically, depending on the framework used by the recipe. So it must be supported, but if it's a CMake or Meson recipe, it should work. And so what this is going to do is create new configuration files within the source, which you can, by default, use with VS Code, I think. And so if you are an application developer, this will be quite useful, I believe. Or if you are not, but you want to give that to someone, that can also be quite useful. So there is documentation over there if you want to dig more. It's quite extensive and good, so I recommend it. Next thing is a big change in stylehead. So previously, a lot of recipes were doing this because they wanted to unpack sources directly within the work directory. This is not possible anymore because I think the reason is simple. It's just we don't want to extract everything within a directory that contains other things that are unrelated to sources. So this is not possible anymore. This will produce an error. And the simple way to fix it is to use another variable called unpack the errors. So the recommended way of setting S and unpack the error is this one. Don't ask me why. This is the way. And so the sources will be extracted in a directory called sources. It will be cleanly separated. I think that's the idea. And then if you need to install files directly from the source on your target, basically you can use the unpackdir variable. I think this is the cleanest way of doing it. And this appeared in StyHead. Right, so small change, but impactful. Next is a bit about fragments and configuration, so top-level configuration. So there is a new concept within the Yocto project called configuration fragments that was introduced actually recently. I think it was by Alex, which is over there, right? So the idea is to abstract some set of configuration, and I've taken an excerpt from the auto builder configuration, which is kind of the CI/CD of Yocto. And so what this does here is just setting some limitations and resources constraints here in a single file, right? And then what you need to do is provide a description and a summary. You need to call add fragments. And so the syntax is detailed a bit more in the documentation. I don't really have time to explain everything. And then at the end, you want to add the fragments that you want in a variable here. And what this will do is simply just take these configurations into account and apply them for your build. And actually, it's, I think, a building block for a bit-baked setup, which is not yet merged into master, but there is some talk about it tomorrow in the OE workshop, so maybe you will get familiar with it if you are participating. There is currently a limited documentation about it, about all of this. I need to work a bit more about this. I need to dig into it. I think it's interesting. It will allow, I think, much more modular configurations overall, and avoid, spreading or gathering everything into a single file. So that is nice. Kind of related to configurations is the include all directive. So this is new. The idea is that you may have a file in multiple layers, like in this configuration here. We have a maintainers.inc. Actually, this is a real use case within the Yocto project. So the file is named the same in different layers, not necessarily the same path. And so the idea is really simple, and it's really simple to use. You can just call include all in another file. It will just go over all of the layers that are listed in BB layers, the variable, and it will just simply include the file. So you can be creative with that. I just put a real use case that probably lists maintainer for different layers, but if you have multiple layers, I guess you can also include some kind of information to say, hey, my layer is there, whatever. I think you can be creative, but that's nice. It's a small convenience thing that wasn't possible before, actually. That's a new variable, which is also quite recent, and I think it's really nice. There's no reason to not use it. I think it's just allowing to compress the firmwares that you install on your target, if you have any. So it's a single variable called firmware compression. By default, it is empty, so no compression is done at all. You can pass either XZ or ZST to this variable, and what this will do is just compress the variables to install on your target, right? You just need your kernel to be configured with either one config or the other here, and the kernel will take care of just decompressing the firmware before loading it. And I did a test on my setup here. I just installed every firmware that was available at the time where I was testing this, but it was around 1.5 gigs. And as you can see, it saves 1 gig for XZ, maybe 700 gigs for ZSTD. Really significant and basically free because you don't have to do a lot to configure this. So I just encourage you to use it. It will save some space on your device. It is always nice. Right, another interesting change that is very recent is the removal of something called debug tweaks. So it's an image feature, which is usually put inside this variable that you can see there. It was an abstraction of several other features. It wasn't really nice for a security, from a security point of view, because it just, you can forget about what it is really doing. So it was removed, and now it will just simply not do anything, I believe. what you need to do is simple. You just need to explicitly list the features that you want to enable. And this is really what it did before. You don't necessarily need all of them, but yeah, I think it's worth mentioning here to keep you updated when you will be updating your Yocto distribution. Something I wanted to talk about, which is interesting, is related to the kernel. So the kernel LTSs are now 2-year. It used to be more. I don't remember what the exact number was, but it switched to 2-year, which is smaller than the lifespan of the Yocto Project LTSs. So there's no real solution to this. I mean, there is one, which is quite simple. The default kernel that is present in the Yocto LTS will at some point, actually at the midpoint of the LTS, be updated to the currently available LTS kernel. So, and the previous one will be left, but not updated, obviously. So yeah, this is, I think, pretty impactful, especially if you are using the Linux Yocto recipe directly. There is a discussion thread and just a reasoning behind it in details at this link if you want to take a look. Another thing that is new, it has been introduced in StyHead, is SPDX 3. So there has been already talks about security during embedded recipes. There was even talk about SPDX, and out of the many things it can do, I'm not an SPDX expert, but it can manage vulnerabilities. And so there is a little example here which associates a package and a CVE. This is an extract from a very good presentation by Joshua. I put some links in there if you want to dig more into it. But this will come in the next LTS and is already available, still under development. There is lots of things going on with this. So it's really important, I think, nowadays to have that. And it leads me into another topic, which is the future of CVE checking within Yocto. So currently we have a class to monitor CVEs, which is called CVE check. And it relies on the NVD. And if you don't know already, there was kind of a lag with the NVD starting in the beginning of 2024. And they just stopped associating CPEs to existing CVEs. So the CPE is just allowing to identify a software component and associate it with the CVE. So what this means, I think the bottom line is that the CVE reports that we have right now within the Yocto project look good, but are missing some known vulnerabilities that just don't have any CPE to match. So it's just not really possible to track this automatically. So I would really like to give you a solution. I don't have one, and actually there's nobody that really has a solution for now. There has been a talk about it.
Kernels now issuing those directly.
Yes, and I think that's one of the ways everyone's going to become a CNA, right?
The CPEs are there today. So you can ignore this. Just take a traffic from our feed. They're there.
Okay.
Can you repeat what Greg said?
Can you repeat what you said?
The kernel's now issuing those directly and feeding them directly, so you don't have to rely on NVD anymore.
Oh yeah, right. So.
That was as of last week.
Oh, last week, okay. So now the kernel is releasing the CVEs and you don't have to rely on NVD, and they already have the CPE, of course, because it's only the kernel, right? So out of this, something that is relied to SPDX is that it may rely on SPDX. The new way of tracking CVEs within Yocto may rely on SPDX 3 since it has that vulnerability tracking feature. To be fair, right now it's under discussion. There needs to be prototypes to be written. There is a beginning of the discussion and actually a huge email by Ross Barton at this link, which gives the context and future maybe decisions to be taken. So just under development, I would say, under discussion. We will see what the future brings, but for now, that's the state. Right, the last item I wanted to talk about is something that is really fresh. It was actually sent maybe like 3 weeks ago, is support for Clang within the Yocto project as a default compiler. And so there was a patch series sent by Raj, which is doing the work for that. So maybe in the future, maybe the next release, I think that's the goal, is to have Clang to be selected as a default compiler and toolchain provider.
GCC will be the default, just that Clang will be directly available from core and be like
Yep.
the first class option.
Right. It will not override GCC. Good point. It will not override GCC. It will simply be an optional thing that you can take.
But it will be tested and
Yeah.
it will work.
It will be tested by the auto builder team, which is over there. Right. So that's interesting. Still work in progress, but in the future we may have this. Last thing, I didn't have time to talk about everything. Those are some more links and hints to new things. Of course, there are the release notes that try to detail everything that is going on within the project. And yeah, I would just really encourage you to take a look at them. And that's all. Thank you.